divine law, by all means, will outweigh and surpass man-made law, and the adl, or the justice that we think we have as humans, is incomparable to the adl and the justice of Allah Azza wa Jal. And we do live in a society now whereby it is egoistic, it is all about individualism, it is about me, myself and I. Islam is completely opposite to that. No matter how much justice you think you have as a human being, as a parent, as a mother, as a father, you realize the justice and the love of Allah Azza wa Jal is by no means comparable.
Have you ever caught yourself thinking, what if Islam isn't the truth? In a society where there are so many religions, ideologies and ways of life, some of us can't help but think that the grass is greener on the other side. But it isn't.
And that's the challenge. As Muslims, we take pride in submitting ourselves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the way of life that He has chosen for us. Truly, it is the one path to success. See what I did there? In a world where morality is decaying, making money is the goal, and isms control the society. It truly is an age of confusion.
That's why we invited our special guest, Ramia Abdo Sultan, an Australian-Palestinian lawyer and community relations advisor to the Australian National Imams Council, to unpack the common trends of liberalism, red pill, blurred gender roles, and so many more hot topics.
Stay tuned for her response. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Sister Ramia, how are you?
Alhamdulillah, wa alaikum assalam. Trying to stay afloat, but we're all doing well, alhamdulillah.
I know you've got a busy schedule, mashallah, but we are very, very honored to have you here, to take out some time and to be here and to have a chat with us. We're very, very excited.
Jazakumullah khair for the opportunity.
Alhamdulillah. All right, let's get going then, inshallah.
But I mean, definitely taking pride in having our esteemed guests, especially locally. So I guess for all of our international viewers as well, would you mind introducing yourself very briefly?
That's always very difficult. So my name is Ramia Abdo Sultan. I'm a mother, I'm a wife, and I'm a lawyer. I was born and raised here in Australia, but I am of mixed Palestinian and Lebanese descent. I have, completed a Bachelor of Laws early on, many years ago. I run my own legal practice now with 2 other partners through Lawbridge Lawyers. I'm also involved in various boards within particularly the advocacy space, so the Australia-Palestine Advocacy Network, APAN, and I'm also Community Relations Advisor to the Australian National Imams Council, ANIC. So, yeah, I do wear a few hats. Yeah. Also involved in 2 humanitarian-based organisations, so there's Charity Right Australia and the Gaza Children's Fund. And I enjoy my, time mingling with the community through the various halaqat or study circles that I run throughout the week, and just staying in contact and remaining connected, I guess, to particularly young women who are our future leaders. I think that's what sort of gives me that motivation to be able to juggle it all. But that's me.
That's what I was going to ask. How do you find time for all of that? Like, I guess, how do you find value in all of those commitments despite the time constraints? Because obviously we're limited to 24 hours in a day.
Absolutely. Look, everyone asks those questions, and I see many other women and brothers as well who are juggling so many other things, and I wonder the same. How are you doing what you're doing? I believe there's, the answer is twofold. One is that you are given a specific skill set by Allah Azza wa Jal that enables you to at least, pursue whatever it is that you want to pursue. So that's one element. And then the second is that the more that you do for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal, there's almost this injection of barakah, which is free time, right? An expansion of your time into your time. And I honestly think that if I was to ever go out and try to purchase that expansion in my time, I'd never find it. Yeah. So the more you do for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal, you just find that your time expands and you think, oh, how did I pull that off? And it's not through my good doing or my abilities. It's truly because Allah Azza wa Jal has allowed, me or whoever it is to be able to do that.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala truly puts barakah in the time, and you get to tick off a lot of things on your schedule and be like, I actually did all of that.
Absolutely. And I think with that all also, and you know, I think we'll talk about it, particularly as women, and you're going to be juggling so many other things, whether it's motherhood, being a wife, and running your own business, and community work and so forth. But time management is also very critical. And yes, you need to lead almost that military, you know, routine life. I see my house almost as boot camp at times, you know, we need to leave at this time and, you know, do this. And it's important. And I think, subhanAllah, having been bound by the 5 set daily prayers sets those things in motion for us as Muslims. It allows us to be able to do those things by default, subhanAllah.
It's really inspiring to see role models like yourself within the community. And I know a lot of young women look up to you and the stuff that you do. And we know that you've been able to manage both your career, but also your Muslim identity. We know you're known as like the hijabi lawyer on Instagram as well. I guess going into these sort of industries, we still get a lot of backlash, right? You know, working women, for example, in law, you get that, you know, practicing secular law is haram. You get some of the backlash. So how do you sort of manage that backlash? Or what would your response be to that?
So if we go back to our roots and we will look at classic scholars and so forth, they were not just experts within the Islamic sciences and so forth. They were also, you know, experts and professionals within professions, right? Whether they were doctors, whether they were scientists and whatnot. And I think there's been a reawakening and a shift of the ummah in that actually you do not just have to be an exclusively career-oriented person at the compromise of your deen. And you don't have to exclusively be a sheikh or a sheikha or a da'wah, you know, da'i or da'wah sort of, you know, messenger, and forfeit your career. You can be both. And I think for me, it's been very, I think it's been something that I've been very passionate about sort of, propagating to the masses, particularly young women, in that actually you can be career driven. You can also be a person who is spiritual, and not only just spiritual, but also be very connected and engaged with your community. And we go back to that, you know, beautiful dua that we all know. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. Allah grant us the best in this life and the next life and keep us away from the fire of hell. It's almost like the, subhanAllah, automatic holistic approach that we are expected to take as Muslims and Muslimas in particular. Allah has given you certain abilities and skill sets. Find a way to be able to benefit not just your home, not just your close circle and family and friends, but the ummah as well. So that's been my mission, right, in my circles, whether it's at work or whether it's in spiritual settings, in that you can and should be both. And we're seeing that. We're noticing that in the upcoming, you know, scholarship, right, where you've got, you know, an engineer who's also a da'i or a sheikh, or, you know, and I think that's very inspiring and important. We need to reclaim that particular narrative, because that's where our origins actually come from.
And Muslims are known to be hardworking people,
Absolutely.
intelligent people. So there shouldn't be any barriers to us sort of pursuing that career ladder as well.
No. And look, by you know, inevitably we are all going to experience the challenges, right? Whether it's the subtle or blatant discrimination, whether it's the direct Islamophobia or indirect, and all of that. But, you know, ultimately that comes with absolutely everything that we are going to do. That's our jihad. That is our struggle. But it should not be a deterrent, right? Yeah. You know, the legal profession is not easy as a female to start off with, but let alone a visibly Muslim female. It has traditionally been a very white and male dominated industry, but it's evolved very much. You're seeing so much diversity. I know so many Muslim lawyers and Muslim hijabi lawyers that are now practicing, and that's been inspiring. And I think with every profession, it's diverse. You don't have to, and by the way, law is not what you see on Suits and so forth. You're actually in the office more than you are ever in court, but it's diverse. If you're not comfortable, you know, attending court and so forth, you can, you know, pursue a path down academia or policy or laws, politics. It's very, very diverse. So whatever makes you comfortable in the end.
You mentioned that, you know, traditionally law is a white male dominated industry, but it's sort of evolved over the years. As someone who's entered into that industry many years ago, how have you practiced setting those boundaries and, I guess, upholding your Islamic identity, and what advice could you give to people who are, I guess, newly starting in the industry?
So for those who are pursuing a career, particularly within law, is begin from the start to think as an employer. How can I? Obviously, you're not going to become an employer overnight. It's a work in progress. But I want to, in the end, be a boss. And how do I, facilitate the path or the direction to enable me or allow me to become a boss? And that's very empowering. So that's one, right? So think like a boss. So from the beginning, yes, gain your experience, interact, mix with completely diverse audiences and keep yourself grounded. I mean, the only way that you are going to, succeed without compromise of your religious values and so forth in any profession is if you are continuing to balance what we call filling your jug as you are pursuing or navigating through your career. So, for example, if you're in a corporate firm or setting that is completely spiritually toxic, but you are not, filling that jug after hours, if you know what I mean. So going to halaqat, going to the masjid, embedding yourself in that community. Of course, you're going to be jeopardizing or compromising your values. So as long as you're doing all that, ultimately, you are going to reach a point, inshallah, where you are only going to be comfortable to practice within, areas or settings and so forth that complement your religious values rather than conflict with. And that's where alhamdulillah, I'm in a position now where I do not compromise. And I'm comfortable, alhamdulillah. I mean, it's very different. I understand when you have finished uni is very different to when you have established yourself. But I'm at a point absolutely now where if a male, white, not white, just a non-Muslim male who was unaware of our boundaries, puts his hand out to shake my hand, I will confidently say, I don't shake hands. I don't need to preoccupy myself with, folders and books, and I'm honest from the outset. For example, other settings such as, drinks and after hours settings and so forth, I'm very honest. I don't drink and I don't attend places where there is alcohol. I'm very confident now because of, where I am in life. Obviously 20 years ago, that would have been very different. But what I'm saying at the same time, honesty from the beginning at times gains the respect of many, many around you without you realizing. So rather than find excuses to get out of something, I can't make it, I've got this on, or be honest. Does the setting have alcohol? Unfortunately, I don't attend these settings. Can we meet up at an alternative, right? But these things only come through empowerment, particularly when you are around your own community.
Yes.
And honestly, I cannot emphasize, particularly for sisters and brothers, the importance of halaqat and study circles, being around like-minded individuals who are all, within their careers, they're navigating that career path, but at the same time, they want to hold on to their religious identity. You then bounce off each other's ideas. How do we deal with the, Purple Day issues that come up at schools? How do we deal with, the gender mixing issues? How do I put my boundaries? And you're able to exchange ideas and an opinion and feel like it's a safe space as well to do so.
I think being part of communities really helps you to bounce experiences and learn from each other. Again, you might have different people coming from different industries, different careers, different life experiences, but to have that comfortable space where you can speak about the things that you are experiencing on a day-to-day life is very, very important and very, very crucial to, filling our jug.
But what's important as well, and I say it to a lot of our, newly sort of founded or established, students, whether it's law students, accountants, whatever you are, is also get out of your bubble early on, expose yourself, because it's also unsafe to stay in that bubble, right? You need to actually see what the other side of the world is doing, what they're thinking like, what are their thought processes looking like. Obviously, the moment you feel like, okay, exposing myself to that bubble or outside of that bubble has compromised me, obviously walk away. But it's also not a solution to stay within that bubble, as 100%. I call it, whether it's, the Muslim community bubble, the local masjid bubble, the Islamic school bubble, the MSAs bubbles within universities, they're all important to be part of, but it doesn't mean put a red line and completely cut off and isolate. You need those skill sets and ability to know how it is that you are going to hold yourself when it comes to interacting with the other side, no matter what.
100%.
Absolutely. SubhanAllah, it just reminds me of the comfort, and that comfort zone is something you don't want to miss out on stepping into the real world, but it's inevitable. You have to build a personality. Yeah. And it's funny because the Western world, it's something that the Muslims sometimes glorify. Like comparing to their own Sharia that we have from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we tend to idolize these man-made laws, and it's quite conflicting with our identities. So I guess my question is, how can we fortify our Muslim identity in a society where we feel like Islam confiscates our freedom and that the West liberates us and gives us freedom? How does that happen?
Yeah, that somewhat derives or comes from that colonized mindset, right? Where even our brains and way of thinking has ultimately been colonized, and you do see it within community. But look, ultimately, I mean, subhanAllah, I actually did, when I did a Master's of Islamic Studies, my main research or thesis piece was about a comparative between the Islamic Inheritance Code and the Australian Inheritance Code. And it was about myth busting, why do women only get this share? Why does a woman get half a share? Blah, blah, blah. And it was all, the entire research piece was about that comparative. And ultimately my hypothesis was that divine law, by all means, will outweigh and surpass man-made law, and the adl, or the justice that we think we have as humans, is incomparable to the adl and the justice of Allah Azza wa Jal. So going back to your question, I think ultimately the only way that we can reconcile these conflicts is that we need to go back to our foundations and understand, why is the Sharia in place? And when we reflect on maqasid al-Sharia, or the intent of laws within Islam, ultimately they're there to serve specific purposes, right? We're talking maqasid al-Sharia ultimately are protection of faith, protection of life, protection of aql, intellect, protection of lineage, and protection of wealth.
Yep.
And if ultimately we understand the purposes and objectives of those maqasid, everything makes sense.
It falls into place.
Right? So, for example, why is alcohol prohibited? Well, it affects and impacts on your brain. Why is gambling prohibited? Because it chips away from your wealth, and it causes you to, spend your wealth unnecessarily. This notion of tabdhir, or unnecessary spending, why is that also something that is referenced specifically and compared to being a companion of shaitan, right? إِنَّ الْمُبَذِّرِينَ كَانُوا مِنْ إِخْوَانِ الشَّيَاطِينَ. So all these things are there in place for us to ensure that we are protecting and preserving those core fundamentals in order for us to make the best of our lives as humans.
Yeah.
When we come to man-made laws, the way that they're critical, right? I mean, man-made laws are critical. Imagine we're all living in anarchy and chaos with no laws. But the difference is that man-made laws are usually prompted by events that go wrong first. And let me explain that. For example, you're a minority group who has been the victim of discrimination. What that prompts is advocacy and lobbying. Through that advocacy and lobbying, you have a bill that may be proposed in order to be enacted or passed, so that you have, legislative protections in place to protect your rights as a minority, as a Muslim, a Sikh, whatever you are, right? It requires something really bad to happen in order for a law to be proposed or passed. The difference is that, subhanAllah, the laws of Allah Azza wa Jal are there before our time.
Yeah.
It's like preempting.
Exactly, right? They're there for our, in our best interests. We are ultimately, no matter how much, and my main area of practice, by the way, is Islamic inheritance law. When you come and unpack all the issues and, the types of cases or matters that I see, no matter how much justice you think you have as a human being, as a parent, as a mother, as a father, you realize the justice and the love of Allah Azza wa Jal is by no means comparable, right? So Allah knows what justice looks like. Hence, when we unpack the inheritance code, for example, ultimately, if you really look into it, females end up with more at the end of it all the time, right? Because they have zero financial responsibility. And there's always this notion that ultimately Islam is perfect, but Muslims are not.
Yes.
So what that again prompts us, and the unique feature about our scripture compared to other scriptures is that we're not going to update our laws in order to stay, in touch with the defects that we have as followers. We don't do that. In Islam, it's a preserved religion, fi lawhin mahfuz, right? Since the beginning of time. And it's there for a purpose. And ultimately that purpose is that I want your best interests at heart, subhanAllah. So if we understand the hikmah, the maqasid, the objectives, and all of those things, and we understand our deen in its true form and essence, everything will make sense.
Yeah.
SubhanAllah.
And this is often something that people see after an event has passed, that they realize that there was so much wisdom and so much hikmah in what actually happened. When we followed the laws of Allah and did things by that basis, then things worked out the way that they were supposed to. And if they'd taken an alternate route, then it wouldn't have worked out the same way. Justice wouldn't have been served.
Absolutely.
I think in the modern day, it's kind of ironic that the secular world sort of freedom, it promotes freedom, that idea of freedom, doing what you want. But the reality is it's been leading to more chaos, right? And so we've seen that ultimately people are following something. And I think it's very easy to say that as Muslims or as human beings, it's in our fitrah to seek guidance, to follow something. And so I guess out of that chaos has emerged a lot of these isms, feminism, socialism, specifically with feminism and women. Does feminism and Islam conflict each other? I guess the modern day feminism.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at the roots of feminism, ultimately, there's something, again, that went wrong, that prompted the rise of feminism. And subhanAllah, again, if we were to unpack our deen, in that, Islam was the only scripture that came to remove that element of women being as an object of ownership to you now having the right to own, right? And the many other changes that Islam came to do, which modern day society and laws have only recently recognized.
Yes, 100%.
Like, again, when we reflect on the Family Law Act, really, it was only until 1975 that we saw, women receiving, it was a fault-based system ultimately, and it became a non-fault-based system. Again, all these changes in favor of women have only happened in less than a century ago, whereas Islam came to do it 1400 years ago. Feminism and the other isms, I guess, have come ultimately, in my opinion, because there has been removal of the true understanding of, what rights and responsibilities are supposed to look like.
Yeah.
Everyone wants their rights, but nobody wants to be responsible.
Yeah, we live in the world of individualism.
Absolutely. So when we're talking about, feminism is the perfect example. And I'm talking within the Muslim community. And when you do have those, elements within or segments within the community that are sort of trying to propagate women's rights and so forth. Again, when you unpack, what they're doing is actually not wrong. But it's something that's come out of something else, right? It hasn't just come out of thin air. And let's be real here. We have males and our brothers who have not upheld their responsibilities in certain aspects, but they do want their rights. And you have women in the same boat whereby they are claiming and calling for their rights, but they've not upheld their responsibilities. So again, solving these issues involves us to go back to our foundations and understand, okay, as a male, what is my responsibility? Before rights, what is my responsibility? As a female, what is my responsibility? As a mother and as a father. And then, all those elements are changing circumstantially in accordance to your life experience. So when you become a mother, you have your responsibilities change. When you become an adult, you now have responsibilities not only to your home, husband, children, but also to your parents, for example. The roles reciprocate. So ultimately, all these isms have come from something that is, I guess, so deficient and wrong, whereby society is completely misunderstood, misinterpreted, completely confused what each, other person's rights and responsibilities are. That it's taken, I guess, a new segment within the community to rise up and call for rights and so forth. But is it a conflict? Absolutely. It can be a conflict. It can be taken too far, whatever it is. I'm not just talking feminism. I'm talking everything else. And we do live in a society now whereby it is egoistic. It is all about individualism. It is about me, myself, and I. It is all about inflating the nafs rather than suppressing it. So when we unpack things like, for example, tazkiyah and purification of the nafs, it goes completely, what we are living through in this dunya today, in this modern world, is a complete opposite. So, if you even feel like something, it's okay. There's Afterpay. Doesn't matter if you don't have money. There's Uber. People think they live in Jannah but it costs you money because Uber costs money. So there's this element of I want what I want now.
Instant gratification.
Instant, and it's a feeding of that nafs, and it's me, myself, and I. As long as I'm happy, as long as my family is happy, doesn't matter what everyone else is thinking or feeling. It's all about me. So it is. Ultimately, yes, it does become a conflict to our values because Islam is completely opposite to that. We are taught to be selfless. Yeah. We are taught to be caring of that ummah. We are taught to be, invested in the ummah and so forth, and love for yourself, love for your brother what you would love for yourself, and the various hadith and so forth. But unfortunately, the modern world does cause that conflict, and it's about you training yourself so well that you're able to overcome those weaknesses.
Yeah. It's really hard, I guess, even for younger children who are growing up, who've grown up within that mindset. We grow up in such a capitalistic society that, we've got all these stories about the Gen Z and the Gen Alpha, and they're different. They're changed. It's a change generation. Like if you compare them to the millennials, they're very much a change generation. And I think it's because they've grown in that community, in that society of that instant gratification, that feeding of the nafs, that it's become really, really hard for them to, I guess, what's the word? Humble? Yeah. To humble themselves?
Yeah. Humble and discipline themselves. And don't forget, I think circumstances differ. So for example, for the generation or two before this one, they are children of direct migrants, generally speaking. Yep. So my grandparents, for example, came to Australia. They were super busy trying to survive. Like literally, just trying to set themselves up for their life here and whatnot. So the concept of saying no, you can't have this was very normal.
Yes.
Right? Having the one pair of sneakers for 2 years was very common. I remember throwing my sneakers in the washing machine to just get it white every so often. Yeah. That's unheard of now, right? Because each generation, and look, it's a good thing. Alhamdulillah, the community is becoming wealthier. It's becoming more comfortable. It's becoming more, grounded within the Australian fabric and so forth. But at the same time, we have to be very cautious. Yeah. How far are we going in potentially creating monsters as opposed to nurturing that fitrah that you referred to earlier? When we're talking about fitrah, what ultimately compromises that? It's the environment and the nurturing or lack of it that affects and impacts it. So it's difficult, very hard.
Very, very hard, yeah. I think just to follow up on that, subhanAllah, it almost makes me feel like some of us are a little bit spoiled. Would you agree?
Not a little bit. I think some of us are a lot. We take for granted a lot of the blessings that we've been given.
I won't say spoiled. Look, we can't be harsh. We're privileged. Undoubtedly, we are privileged. And look, if Allah Azza wa Jal has granted you ability to live comfortably and so forth, absolutely. But you also need to find ways and means to humble yourself. And, we reflect on Ramadan. Ramadan is the ultimate training ground for that nafs. We are teaching it that actually, no, I am not going to let you be my master. I'm your master. But imagine doing that every, couple of months throughout the year. Why do we have to wait for Ramadan to do that? So, and I always say, we talk about this within our halaqat settings in that, you're sometimes walking through the shopping center and you smell that aroma of coffee, or you get a glimpse of that nice acai bowl, whatever it is. You're like, I'm having that. Actually, one day, deprive yourself. Say, it smells good, but no. I mean, you can have it, but it's just about teaching yourself. It's that tazkiyah, that purification. And with wealth, how often are we purifying our wealth through sadaqah, through charity? And the more expensive form of charity, I believe, is time, not money. Money is easy. Anyone tells me I need help, I'm like, how much does it cost? Yeah. Take it and go. But for me, it's time. How much time are we injecting back into that, akhirah portfolio so that we have something to fall back on when the time calls for it?
Spoken like a true lawyer.
Yeah.
To the akhirah portfolio. I love that.
That's right.
It actually reminds me of an Arabic statement. أَوَ كُلَّمَا اشْتَهَيْتَ اشْتَرَيْتَ. Like, is it every time you desire something that you just put the money down and that's Absolutely. It, you have it. So it's quite ironic. Our society has definitely changed. And I guess going from individuals now to partnerships and relationships, do you find that we've changed from a traditional marriage mindset to a more modern, individualistic, like nafsi, I want my rights, not so much responsibilities, but I want my rights fulfilled. And has that caused a higher outcome of divorce in our community?
Undoubtedly. I mean, yeah, through my line of work, that's ultimately, when I see clients in my office for that purpose, it means that's it. They've reached the end of the line. And yes, look, not to say that there are obviously clear and blatant issues at times within relationships. Like there should not be any compromise when it comes to abuse and all of that stuff. I mean, absolutely zero, right? But when it comes to other matters such as, lack of understanding of what my responsibilities are, in that, I entered this marriage on the assumption that I now have a full-time servant and my expectations are here, but my contributions are all the way down there. That's problematic. And yes, we are seeing that. We're seeing a situation where, unfortunately, and then it goes back again, when we don't understand our teachings or the ethos of our deen, in that it is centered around rights and responsibilities. If we understand those basics, there will be no problem. But unfortunately, yes, you do see that. You see, whether it's males or females, right? But generally speaking, whether it's, males expecting, A to Z to take place, but they themselves are not, undertaking or fulfilling their responsibilities as males, and the female the same way. It obviously does result, unfortunately, in breakdowns of marriages and so forth. And who are the collaterals or the victims of it all? It's the children. And it's that sort of vicious cycle that just continues. So if we are, and look, I understand there are pre-marriage courses and all of that, and they're great, but they're temporary. It's actually very easy to read out of a textbook and to learn things in theory, but ultimately, that all starts from the home. When you are raising children and you are showing them through role modeling, this is what a man is supposed to be doing. This is what a female is supposed to be doing. It all becomes innate. You don't even need to say it. It's just automatic. So yes, everyone is transformable and reformable and all that, but ultimately for the entirety of their life, they have only been raised to one way. That's very difficult to change.
I guess generations are also evolving. So what one generation deemed to be okay in terms of male role and female roles within the home, within the marriage dynamic, have sort of evolved, right? We see that a lot of the time now, both men and women are both working within the marriage, whereas that may have not been the case in that previous generation or, 20 years back, for example. So how do we also adapt to, I guess, the modern society and the modern necessities that we've had to sort of live?
I'm going to throw a spanner in the works, actually, say at times, yes, you're right, but sometimes you have the perfect role models by way of, father and mother, and then young person who's about to, is of marriageable age, has a completely different outlook on life. And then when you unpack what it is, how are you so different to your father? Your father is great. He's not abusive. He's very gentle. He's very, negotiable. There's no sort of, it's my way or the highway, I'm the man, or vice versa. You come to realize also, who is he following or who is she following? Because at times, again, your home may be perfect, but you have those influences from outside that are directing you to otherwise. And it's very important that also we are being mentored and guided by the right and appropriate people. They're ultimately shaping, and at times, I'll probably say this more towards the brothers because they have the capacity and ability to spend more time out.
Yes.
Spend more time at the masjid than a sister would, for example. So ultimately, they could possibly be spending more time at that masjid with that particular mentor. I'm not saying sheikh, because it's not necessarily the sheikhs. There are mentors within community spaces, unfortunately, that do influence, whether it's negatively or positively, but do influence and shape mindsets that at times going to contribute to the detriment of one's home. So who you are following, who are you seeking advice and guidance from, who are you consulting and asking? This notion of mentorship in today's age is critical. Is it Instagram? Is it social media? Is it a random person within the masjid or a community center who suddenly jumped onto the path, which is great, but taken an extreme angle because they were in an extreme in their previous life, the Jahiliyyah life, I call it. So suddenly they've taken an extreme approach, which causes a deterrence at times.
Yeah.
So yes, home is important, but also your mentorship is very critical.
What should you look for in a good mentor?
I think history and rapport within the community, almost like, honestly, in the same way that you are going to, say, employ an employee and you have a CV, you have this almost virtual CV of this particular person. You know, how long have they been doing this? What's their influence and impact on the community? What have they? It's really important not to write off anyone who's new. Absolutely, because, you know, we do need that new blood, and we do know there are amazing young people out there who are amazing mentors, and they're connecting with the young people and so forth. But it is very important that you use your aql and intellect and suss out and make inquiries about this person who you are ultimately going to be shaped by. We cannot be silent, blind followers. Allah has given us aql and intellect. We use it. We question respectfully. You know, these constant rhetorical questions within the Quran, you know, أَفَلَا يَعْقِلُونَ أَفَلَا يَعْقِلُونَ. Ask. You are prompted to ask, you know, ask about this person. Because ultimately they will have an influence and impact on the trajectory that you take when you are married, ultimately, and how you raise your children.
So as much as it is important to vet your potential spouse, it's also important to vet your friends and who you're being influenced by.
Definitely.
I guess in the world of social media, a lot of the time, you know, the young people, old people, everyone who is exposed on social media is obviously being influenced by social media influencers. I guess, do you think that's really changed? We've seen, like, you know, we've seen the dawah bros sort of go out on their extreme end of dawah. We've seen influencers, female influencers, go on the other end. Do you think it's really polarized the youth?
It has, and it's very scary. It's been very scary in a sense where social media is great, right? It's got its benefits, but there is so much information, too much information that's become overwhelming. And not only that, unfortunately, with that information has come misinformation. There's no, I guess, I don't want to say there's deception because it's not intended, but at times there's not enough honesty. Like, I'll give an example. I by no means at all ever would say or call myself a scholar. I'm not a scholar. I'm only a messenger. I'm a da'wah worker, literally. I have information that I learn at times and I transmit that information. That is it. Anything within, you know, that has any form of complexity that requires intricate sort of questioning and so forth, I direct it to the experts, right, of scholarship, even within our community. You know, Jamaluddin's on my speed dial if I need to ask her. And I'm very honest when someone asks me something, because there's this impression if you are involved in, say, a study circle or a halaqah, or you've given a talk or two, you're suddenly qualified. No, I'm not. I'm not. So I direct those things. So unfortunately, the confusion also on social media is that you have a influencer, be it a male or a female, who perhaps references a few verses, a few hadith, and suddenly they're a scholar. But that's not it. What about, you know, those who've pursued at least a decade's worth of studying abroad, whether it's Al-Azhar or Medina, wherever it is, and they are still, you know, staying put and low because they're too afraid to share what they have in the event that they may actually make an error, right? So that mis and over information is causing havoc at times. I was watching something very recently by a very well-intended international influencer. Complete misinterpretation of a particular verse of the Quran, which shocked me because, you know, this person's got over 1 million followers and anyone can find comfort in that interpretation of that specific verse. And it's wrong. You know, it's actually wrong. It's completely misinterpreted. So it is dangerous. You know, I think what needs to happen as well is there needs to be a way where we can amplify the scholars that need to be amplified, you know, and I don't know how that's going to happen because I know that there's that generational disconnect at times with certain, like, for example, Dr. Hayfa Yunus is amazing, mashallah. And I went to her retreat last year. She Amazing.
We had
Contemporary
her
scholar.
We had her
Yeah.
in our first podcast.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah.
But how do you connect Dr. Hayf Yunus to a 15-year-old here in Australia?
100%.
It's very difficult.
Mhm.
So there needs to be at least that middle, person, mouthpiece, I guess, who's able to transmit that and subtly transmit it to the young people who are able to connect. But yeah, it's a very scary time.
Yeah.
Very scary.
I guess that's the middle generation, myself included, that's probably our job to sort of make
Yes.
that connection and to be those people that pass along that message and to become those mentors to the young people so that I guess we're growing and we're nurturing the newer generation.
And when you see, I don't even want to call them influencers, when you see individuals that do have platforms whereby they are presenting themselves as that ideal, right? They tick the box in a sense where the product, if you want to call it, the social media product that they're selling is genuine information and direction. We have a responsibility to also amplify that, as opposed to influencers, with all due respect, who are just filming their day-to-day life, which is great. That's amazing. But again, this is an amana that you have been given. It's a blessing, right? I mean, you've been given a skill, a rizq, if you want to call it, of 1 million followers. What are you actually doing with that, right? So how is it that we can also amplify and push out those with platforms who are able to transmit information and even not even information, appearances that you want your daughter one day to follow. I mean, what's shocking is that influencers that do start at times with great intentions, next minute, hijab's off. Next minute, an announcement's made as to why I took hijab off and everyone's clapping. That's fine. And I have absolutely no issues with that. But this is that influencer that my young child was once following and put all their hopes in. And then suddenly that's shifted and changed. So it's a very dangerous time.
It is. It's very dangerous.
I think in the reverse as well, it can be quite deceptive, especially for our youth or just us as laymen, like speaking about myself, to look at someone with a niqab or a thawb and idolize them. So yes, there are people that are maybe doing the wrong thing online, but people also, appear to be righteous, and some of us unfortunately fall for the trap.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Social media filters those elements that you would otherwise be able to pick up in real life.
You can't see those like human cues, the social cues that, that's
you don't know.
Very dangerous. Very dangerous. And character and morals ultimately are what matter. And social media completely filters that. You'll never know the character of a person based on a 2-minute blog or 1 minute, whatever. Yeah. You only learn these in circles, face-to-face circles. How does this person, hold themselves or carry themselves in public? How do they actually speak? What is their treatment of others like? You can only pick up on that face-to-face interactions.
We've also seen the benefits of social media. Again, in the past year, we're coming to almost a year now, of us being able to get information, for example, about what's happening in Gaza, about what's happening right now in Lebanon. That information is only getting to us because we have these social media outlets. And we've been seeing this for so long that a lot of people have become desensitized to it as well, that, we've started going about our day without sort of thinking about it, whereas it was on the top of our mind, right at the beginning. How do we stop ourselves from being desensitized?
So almost like the Arab Spring that occurred in around the 2012 or so-ish period, particularly in Egypt and whatnot, we learned from then that social media is going to change the setting and the scene, I guess, for global or mainstream media. We're not going to rely on mainstream media to report truths, and that in fact it's social media that is going to be the mouthpiece and microphone for truth and justice. So it's critical, right? And particularly in the last year with the genocide that's been unfolding and even before then, in the lead up to when we saw the uprising, I guess, within East Jerusalem at the time, Muna Kurd and so forth, and the demolition orders that were given against certain residents, that was all through social media. It's important, right? Because ultimately we are not going to sit back and hope that we're going to get our news from whether it's Channel 9, 10, ABC, SBS even. Not going to happen. Maybe Al Jazeera, but even that has been heavily filtered or censored. So it's very important. But yes, it does cause a sense of desensitization and almost like an element of I give up. What's the point? And I feel like when things get to that, we're checking our phone constantly. And I was listening to someone the other day, we only used to receive news once a day, right?
6
on that
o'clock
headline,
news.
and that was it. And that was enough. Why are we checking our phones by the minute? Yes, news is absolutely changing, right? It's not stagnant. It's changed. It's not static. Changing by the minute. But, what is it? How is it shifting me? And I think you're the best of judge for yourself. When I finish watching or reading this news, what am I doing with it? Is it just sitting with me and then I just feel deflated and completely unproductive and, helpless and in a state of despair? Or am I then has it prompted me to write that letter to whoever it is, whether it's a media outlet, whether it's to a MP, whether it's pay a sadaqah, whether it's make a dua or get up and pray rak'atain of some sort? Has that, exposure allowed me to channel my response into something positive or negative? If it's negative, you probably need to step back a bit. Disconnect, cut yourself off from social media for a bit, withdraw, not detox, exactly. Detox so that you can reignite that passion and that drive to keep going. And the last thing, honestly, and I know this within the advocacy and lobbying space, and these are comments that come from people that are close in the circles to you. What's the point? For a whole year, you've been protesting. For a whole year, you've been advocating, lobbying, speaking to this parliamentarian, writing this letter to this. But what has it done? Nothing. Let's say it has done nothing. But when I face Allah Azza wa Jal and I am asked, what did you actually do? I have something to present. And it's the effort that we are going to be questioned upon and held accountable for, never the result. We were never created to be held accountable for the result, in a sense where, if I pursue something that is even for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal, but I never achieve that as a tangible result, I'm not going to get punished or, held to account for it. Allah is going to look at the effort that I put and injected into that thing. So we have a responsibility and we need to be responsible as beings. We need to be responsible for ourselves in that we assess and analyze the extent of exposure. Funnily enough, we apply these things to young people. You only have screen time of this much. We need that for adults. We need screen time monitoring for adults. If this is desensitizing you, detox, take a step back, And what I mean by take a step back is not take a step back and go into your,
gaming room
or cave and just completely sleep or knock yourself out for it. No, detox by reconnecting. Go back to your roots. Go back to your community. So go to the masjid. Pray your Isha at night. Connect with humans and your community. Listen to a dars or a lecture or a lesson after Isha. Go to a halaqa. You must. And this is why, subhanAllah, since the beginning of the genocide in October, I don't know if you remember, there were a lot of community-based forums and collectives, and they are critical. They are so important to be part of because you are reconnecting with, with humanity, ultimately, reigniting that sense of care and ambition and motivation that you would otherwise lose if you're on your own. And isolation's horrible, and social media at times does isolate you.
And I think because everything is happening so far away, it is again over time it's become hard to see this as human beings. Like, we claim that obviously that media outlets are not representing the Palestinian struggle, the genocide, as something that is affecting human beings. But I think at times when we watch these videos, we forget that these are actual people, these are actual families, and they're actual experiences. And I think reconnecting with humanity, reconnecting with people around you really helps you sort of, I guess, reshape your thinking and change
and
your
their
mindset.
Stories, right? And their stories of struggles, whether they're new arrivals from Gaza or Palestine or even local struggles. Like, again, just reconnecting with people just puts things into perspective for you. You say, what, alhamdulillah, that I'm, able and okay to still carry on and continue. But there was an important point that I wanted to make. Forgot. But yeah.
Easy. No, that's all good.
So I guess as a final gesture, just to sort of put everything into perspective. So we want to be good Muslims. We want to appreciate the Sharia that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mandated for us. So is that going to bring us a free Palestine? Just as a frank question, is that the answer?
It is part of the answer,
Mm-hmm.
undoubtedly. Again, we reflect on prophetic example. The Prophet, peace be upon him, was a holistic being.
Mm-hmm.
He was a father, a leader, a husband, a mentor, a politician. He was a governor. He was everything. And I think we have a lot to learn. And this is a time, I think, yes, obviously connect to the Quran, connect to the Sunnah, but to the Seerah. There are so many lessons from the Seerah that we can take. You know, even the notion as simple as Islamophobia, it's not a new concept.
Yeah.
It is something that has been around since the beginning of Islam. So when we reflect on that, we realize that, yes, reconnecting to Allah Azza wa Jal and finding our true Islamic calling and identity is critical, but we can't do it on its own. So you've got two, I guess, directions. You've got the activists that are really good at their activism, but they're very disconnected from their Islam. And then you've got the opposite. You know, Islam, you know, you're going to do your qiyam, your dua, but that's not going to bring about change on its own.
Yes.
Not taking away the extent. You know, again, the Prophet ﷺ just before battles would get up and make dua. And then he would fight the battle, right? So the point is that you need actual both. You need both.
You need both.
You need to be an advocate and a lobbyist, but also a highly, highly spiritual being during these very turbulent times. One or the other is not going to work. You must be both because, again, you know, this notion of tawakkul, there's an action that comes with it. You must pursue. You can't just sit there and make dua for whatever it is. I want to become a doctor. I want to get married. I want victory in Palestine, and not actually pursue steps to see that unfold and happen. So undoubtedly, though, I think the Ummah is going through a process of significant awakening. And this is the litmus test for us now, in that, you know, how badly do you want to see victory in Palestine, and not just Palestine, the entire Ummah. And subhanAllah, I share this story all the time, but when I visited Jerusalem in 2014, and, you know, we mixed with locals and so forth, and you ask them, what do you want? What can we do for you? And they'd say, obviously, keep visiting us, but tell the Ummah to repair its condition, because the Aqsa is the thermometer of the Ummah.
Wow.
When the Ummah is at its peak in terms of its Iman, you see victory in Al-Aqsa. When it is at its lowest, you see defeat. And how true are those words? You want victory in Al-Aqsa? Without doubt, you must reflect on your own personal attributes and connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What am I doing first and foremost to rectify myself, to repair my state so that I can see true and imparting change on the other side of the world? It's very much connected.
Yeah.
And when we look at, you know, again, prophetic hadith and examples of various stories that have been relayed to us, you know, the drought that befell a particular time during the time of Musa alayhi salam, and it was because of one sinner that drought, occurred. It wasn't until he sought forgiveness that the rain poured. SubhanAllah. So your action has a direct impact on what's happening on the other side of the world. Don't ever think that, my sins don't affect the rest of, or the condition of the ummah. It absolutely is connected.
That so ties in with the whole individualism conversation that we just finished, that as Muslims, we are supposed to be selfless. We are supposed to be caring. And your actions, and this is a very secular sort of mindset, your actions are for yourself and they don't affect others. As long as they don't harm others, you're good, right? Whereas in Islam, we believe that we are all interdependent as human beings. You know, the ummah is one body. And so that idea of you having an impact and even your personal connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is significant, is valuable for the people of Palestine, is a very important way of thinking, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I love the analogy that you gave, that the Prophet ﷺ, he would make dua and then he'd go for battle. That's a very simple and easy way to sort of understand that, you know, as Muslims, especially with the struggle of Palestine, with the genocide that's happening, we have to have tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have to pray and we have to ask him, because ultimately victory is in his hands. But at the same time, we have to do our part.
Absolutely.
we have to sort of take a step, and don't be afraid to take those steps.
And if the Prophet, peace be upon him, did not, I mean, Allahu Alam, but if he asked Allah for victory, surely he would get it, right? But there's an example for us. I mean, the Prophet, peace be upon him, was sent down as a practical example for us to show us in human language that you need to do A, B, and C. You can't just stand and make dua and ignore everything else. And you can't only be active and pursue that and ignore. The two they go hand in hand. Our deen is holistic. It's a very holistic religion, subhanAllah. And the more we understand that, the more we'll see a change and a shift.
Inshallah. Any final thoughts, anything?
I guess, just victory starts with you, and you are the hope for the ummah. That's really it.
Yeah.
SubhanAllah. So Jazakallah khair, Sister Ramia, for your time. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and your family. And I'd love to see you again on the podcast. But until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.